All right, Beneath Apple Manor by Don Worth. Yeah, let's crack open the manual here. And we got a little story here actually. Even adventure games don't actually have that much plot. A good thing right off the bat is that the game absolutely assures us that the monsters are the bad guys and the people that we're stealing from are not good. And also, our character's motivation for going through this is literally just to become a better fighter. This is going to become a recurring theme, but Beneath Apple Manor is very tight. Everything about it is just so cohesive. And then the manual goes on to explain what the appeal of the game is. I think that's like really quaint and old-timey when they have to like tell you where the fun is supposed to come from. So in case you just don't know for whatever reason, Beneath Apple Manor is like a dungeon crawly, hacky slashy, treasure gathery, level uppy kind of game. So yeah. There's a little bit of shade being thrown here, assuring the player that this is not another Wumpus lookalike. I've never played Hunt the Wumpus, so I can't really say. It also says that it's easier to play than Star Trek. That's definitely true. I really like the attitude of this game. Like what they're making here blew everything else out of the water, and they know it, and they're kind of cocky about it. Beneath Apple Manor is a really breezy experience. Like it's easy to get into, easy to have fun with. It's not too complicated, but there is a lot of depth to the mechanics and a lot of strategy. This manual kind of gives me like a proto id Software kind of feel. Initialization. Okay, so this is a computer game. We got parameters. Pretty much all of my original criticisms for the game can be mitigated using the parameters. First off, you have a number of rooms. The game recommends 5, but for me, I found the magic number was 3. Shorter games are just always better, period. The only kind of downside I found to having less rooms is that if you're getting your ass kicked, you have less places to run away to. So that has gotten me killed a couple times. You also have the option of playing with colored squares or with ASCII graphics. I've only ever played with color, so I don't know what the hell ASCII's about. Next, we have difficulty factor. This just changes how hard the enemies are and how much treasure there is. The manual says that a higher difficulty factor makes the game shorter but harder. But in my opinion, a harder difficulty makes the game longer because you just have to restart more times. I found that a difficulty factor of about 5 is good for me. Sometimes I play on 4. I've tried 3, but no matter what, when you get to the end, it's going to be hard as balls anyway. I really love this little illustration down here that explains difficulty factor. It really does a good job at like stimulating your imagination and imagining the numbers as actual things in real life. All right, so we got that sorted out. Let's hop in game for a little bit, see what this is like. All right, here we go in the dungeon. Hey, hold on. I've seen a review before for Beneath Apple Manor 1978, and it didn't look like this. Yeah, there was a DOS remake of this game that was distributed widely in the 80s. And I have seen more than one review of Beneath Apple Manor 1978 where they just played the 1983 version. I don't know how the heck you make a mistake like that, but this is what Beneath Apple Manor 1978 actually looks like for the Apple II. Okay, now we got the stats. The stats are pretty much the beating heart of Beneath Apple Manor, and they're probably the best aspect of it. To start, we have strength. That dictates how much damage you do from physical attacks. It also dictates how much gold you can carry on you at any one time. And it also dictates your chances for breaking down doors, which I'll talk about more later. And also, every time you break a door or every time you hit an enemy, your strength goes down by 1. It's super immersive that your character actually gets tired from wailing on enemies. And like, not only do you run out of attacks, but also every time it goes down, you do less damage. And if you're tired, you might need to drop some of your gold to run away. Now we have intelligence. Those are simply spent to cast spells. Most of the depth with the intelligence stat is tied to the actual spells themselves, which I'll talk about later. But again, like strength, every time you cast a spell, your intelligence goes down. So not only do you have limited uses, but you also get weaker as you get tired. Next, we have dexterity. That's simply your chance to hit. Dexterity goes down when you move around the dungeon. So you have to stop and rest every now and then to get your dexterity back up if you're moving around a lot. And if a monster catches you while you're tired, it's going to be hard to hit him. Next, we have body. This is just your hit points. They go down when you take damage, but here's the thing. It's the only stat that's not replenished by resting. So you're going to have to use your heal spell. Your stats are all kind of like pools that get spent in combat or exploration. and you can spend experience to increase your maximum stats. I love the stats in this game so much because they're designed so tightly and everything is so cohesive. Like everything you do in the game affects something else, and the exploration and combat come together really well. All right, so what are these green things anyway? The manual describes all the different monsters that there are in Beneath Apple Manor. These green things are slimes. All of the monsters are very distinct, and fighting them feels different. They're very much akin to maybe the different enemy types in Doom. There's no kind of like normal enemies in Beneath Apple Manor. All of the enemies are so much richer and more diverse than the enemies in, say, a Calibeth or something. But they all do different things. They all have different hit chances. They all drop different amounts of loot. The ghost actually doesn't do damage. It drains your strength, which is interesting. Okay, now the manual describes all of the movement commands. There's really a lot of things you can do, and exploration has just as many options as combat, if not more. By pressing R, you can run away from a monster in a certain direction. You'll drop your gold, and it halves your dexterity. It's really interesting when you get your ass kicked in this game because running away has so many options. And if you were just getting your ass kicked and your stats are low, then it's really hard to do some things. Alrighty, let's talk about some doors now. I think it's interesting to pay particular attention to the way that doors are done in games, because the mechanics of how the doors work is the designer directly telling you how they want you to explore the world. And so in Beneath Apple Manor, doors are a pretty big deal. You can bash them open or kick them open or listen through them or look around for hidden doors. It's really interesting assessing how much of a threat you can put up with before you make the plunge through a door. And that whole risk assessment, risk versus reward thing is where a lot of the tactics kind of come from. I really like that the actual combat commands are the simplest commands in the whole game. You just press A to attack. And all of the actual depth and complexity comes from all of the things around the combat. And we also have chests that contain the various items and treasure. I want to say that opening a chest is genuinely rewarding and super exciting. There's lots of other games that came out around this time that involved finding treasures, but my problem with all of them is that finding the treasures wasn't exciting and it didn't benefit me in any way. But the value of the treasures in Beneath Apple Manor are defined by how they benefit you directly. You get XP equivalent to the amount of gold that you find, so finding a ton of gold is really rewarding. And there's a ton of little random items that you can find that actually help or actually hinder you. There's potions that either double or halve one of your stats. And I could just be reading way too much into it, but I feel like those are placed there intentionally to help you with overserved or underserved stats. Because there's been a couple times where I had a really underserved stat and I happened to find potions that doubled it. And there's also really exciting items like the wand that unlocks all doors for the whole game. Bashing down doors is such a big part of the game that simply not having to do it changes everything. The manual directly credits all of the playtesters, and there's quite a few of them. I will say that it's very, very apparent that this game was really well playtested. It has a really textbook sort of modern game development difficulty curve. It'll start out hard and you'll be kind of starved for some things. And then the game gives it to you and you get super strong and it's easy. But then the next enemies are introduced and there's kind of like a golden experience shortage for a little bit. And it repeats that like 3 or 4 times until the game ends. Also, no matter how brutal the game gets, it's still very forgiving and very much playable. Like, yeah, you can get overpowered or underpowered for any one level, but every time you go deeper into the dungeon, it creates a new level that's appropriate to your level. So yeah, you can fall behind with the stats, but the game will always keep pace with you. The economy is also pretty good. There's a couple weapons and armor that you can buy early on, but most of the time you'll be looking to gold so you can buy saves. And again, like what I said about the treasure being exciting to find, you really get excited when you get a lot of gold because that means you can save your freaking game finally. The price of a save is always just within your grasp, and the amount of time that you have in between saves is just enough to be intense. Again, going back to a Calibeth, like the economy in Beneath Apple Manor is so much better than the economy in a Calibeth. I said this before and I'll say it again, but like the defining quality of Beneath Apple Manor is how tight the whole experience is. The story and the character's motivation are aligned with your motivations. Everything has an effect on everything else. The economy is balanced. The difficulty curve is there and feels very much intentional. And it's just so good at producing stories based on all of the numbers. Like, for instance, it costs one strength to hit a door, and your chance to get through a door is based on your strength stat. So every now and then, when you're weak and trying to escape an enemy, you have no choice but to just bang helplessly on a door as they rip you apart. All right, now I'm just going to talk about some of the bad things. The number one most apparent negative thing about this game is that it's freaking slow. It feels about the same speed as a Calibeth. Dungeon Campaign is a similar kind of game that came out. It's a lot simpler, but it's faster. And also, my other bad thing is that I would appreciate if your max stats were on the screen, because I always forget what my maximum stats are. Anyway, that's my video. You're all beautiful. I love you. Bye.